Welcome back to the updates for the Energy Sovereignty Project. First, I'd like to apologize for taking so long and getting this update going. I was having an issue with the accuracy of the information that was coming in to me. It was changing daily, it was contradicting itself, didn't seem like something that I should be presenting. Rather that I'd wait until everything settled out and then we could discuss what was going on with the back and forth. For those who've been following, the biggest headache that we've been having so far is availability of the Powerwall batteries. It took us quite a while to get hold of those. They did finally all arrive. However, again, for those who've been following us, August came and went and with no Powerwalls. Early September, they wound up getting the shipment of the Powerwalls, and shortly after that, they were able to submit the plan for the full system, and that plan was denied. So again, those who've been following the bouncing ball here will remember that there was some disagreement between Sunworks, the installer of the solar system itself, and the utility company, is as far as how that transfer was going to take place, the amount of power that the utility company provided as opposed to the amount of power that was supplied by the home. The insistence on the part of the utility company is that at some point you're going to have both of those draw, whether it's through a short or what exactly they're imagining, I don't know, but that a standard hookup for a home is it's a 200 amp hookup, and because we were supplying all of the power that the home would need, which was 200 amps, that they insisted that we then install a 400 amp service. Well, so that's where we're at, and again, we'll discuss that at in a later update, and we've already got some workarounds for people who want to do this project going forward, but for now we had to placate the utility company and go ahead and upgrade the service to 400 amps. So that's what they're doing. The site survey from SMUD was done in September, and we got the go-ahead for the upgrade to the system. The upgrade will be taking place in a week or so, and they'll be doing the install at the same time as the upgrade. And again, that's another part of that ever-changing landscape of this all. Initially, we were told that they would do the upgrade to the service, and then a week later they would do the install. Where now we're told, no, this has gone on too long, and they're going to go ahead and coordinate with SMUD so that at the same time, the same block of days that they have set up, they're going to go ahead and upgrade the service to 400 amps and then install the batteries at the same time. So we can go into that at length a little bit later at the end of the video. I don't want to bury the lead, as it were. I don't want to disappoint people who just tuned in and want to hear about the title. So the title of the video here is what Vox got wrong with their duck curve, and I like Vox. I do. They're very informative. It's usually very well researched, and the issue that I have about the duck curve thing was their title. And in their title, they said that the greatest challenge to solar was the duck curve. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because what I'm going to show you now is that the issue with solar is so very not the duck curve. The duck curve, I'm not sure who is familiar with that. I'll put a link to Vox's video so that you can check it out. The duck curve is this daily drop-off that occurs when you have a production of solar. And so what happens is that the power plants, the amount that they're having to produce in midday is dropping dramatically to near zero. Well, as soon as the sun goes down, woo, that climbs back up, and because it kind of resembles a duck, that's where it got its name. Well, that trough has only been worsening. It's going to be greater and greater and greater and greater as more solar comes online. And an issue is that there's no battery power in the evening to smooth that out, right? And so the plants that they have that are designed to kind of keep balance in the system, they're no longer able to keep up. The curve has dropped now so low that it's very difficult for them to keep up. They have to either stay online far longer than they want. It's just these plants don't react very fast. And that's where you see things like the battery installation that's going on in Australia, where they are using that to basically smooth out the grid's production. Works absolutely fantastic. So the problem with Vox's video is that they didn't address the battery solution until the very end, and then they only kind of slipped it in there as and the public utilities will do this. No. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got for our production at the Energy Sovereignty Project home. So what we've got here, this is the chart for April. And so let me go ahead and add in the line showing what our usage line was. And so now you see we have the home use for April was 23.8 kilowatts a day on average. Again, that's going to vary somewhat day to day. I drew it as just an average line just to try and make things a little simpler at this point. Well, that's a total for the month of 960 kilowatts. Okay, and so now let's move down to June. Okay, and here's the chart for June. We'll do the same thing. So now we've got the home use for June is 28.1 kilowatts a day. Gives us a total of 814 kilowatts. And there's our red line showing where that is. July, boom. Now we start seeing the production numbers coming up. Note the scale on the side, the kilowatt scale, you'll see is reducing. So be sure you pay attention to that if you're thinking that, oh, the production is going down or what have you. So be mindful of the scale. So you've got, for June, we've got an average use of 28.1 kilowatts a day, a total of 814 kilowatts. And then in July, here in Sacramento, the heat really starts to come up. We're inland, so it's generally about 10 degrees or so hotter than it is in the coastal areas of California. And so the air conditioning ramped up. And so in July, I have to admit, I wasn't monitoring the air conditioning as much as I probably should have. I was basically leaving it like an icebox. Mom was happy. She's living there. And so the usage wound up going up to 43.4 kilowatts a day for, again, a total that month of 1,388 kilowatts, 1.3 megawatts. Then we're looking at August. Now in August, a couple of interesting things happen. In August, the temperature also is rising, and the solar panels don't operate as efficiently in the heat as they do in cooler temperatures. So some of that, you see the efficiency come down. Again, we're still overproducing by a good margin. It's just now things are starting to come down just a bit. But also the overall usage for August came down a little bit, 37 kilowatts a day for a total of 1,073 kilowatts of usage. And then we get into September. September also we saw a slight reduction in usage. Temperatures are getting cooler, more closely monitoring the AC as well, keeping the home realistic instead of keeping it as an icebox. And so then we went down to 31 kilowatts a day, which is right around what I kind of have been shooting for an average usage of the home. Use a little bit less than that in winter, using more of the gas heat rather than air conditioning. And so that gave us a total of 930 kilowatts used. And then finally in October, again starting to still cool down, the efficiency of the panels go up a little bit, and now we're looking at 19.5 kilowatts, so almost a little over a 10 kilowatt per day reduction, simply because we're now no longer using the AC again, and so that gives us a total usage of 606 kilowatts. So back to the issue that I'm having with Vox's duck curve video. Basically, again, it's twofold. Firstly, if you're going to say that something's a challenge, then what you're doing is you're insinuating that there's some difficulty to solving the problem. There's no difficulty in solving the duck curve problem. A couple of batteries, even if you're not going to build a system to the energy sovereignty standards the way that we're projecting with all this excess battery capacity, even if you only have one or two batteries, the duck curve problem is solved. So that's unfortunate. And then the second annoying thing is that their implication by the end statement that the utilities need to install the batteries is that the utilities need to install the batteries. And once again, you're in a situation where you are consuming from the utility. That makes zero sense, and let's look at that in a fun way. In terms of energy sovereignty. So the Tesla Model S ranges right around 300 watt hours per mile, and what that comes out to is for every 100 miles you travel, you use 30 kilowatts of charge in the car. Well, I drive mine like a Ferrari, so my average is a little less. So if you don't drive like a lunatic, you'll do a little better. So mine, over the course of 100,000 miles, I just rolled over 100,000 miles in the car. I'll be doing a future video. We'll do a little 100,000 mile evaluation of the Model S. That should be a fun video to do. But over the course of 100,000 miles, my average has been 32.4 kilowatts per 100 miles. So let's go with that, so we're not accused of not being fair, not being real world, because again, the whole purpose of doing the Energy Sovereignty Project is to keep this as real world as possible, to report what actually happens, not what might happen, what theoretically could happen, or what actually happens. And so with those numbers in mind, and let's backtrack just a little bit. So with EVs in general, and Tesla specifically, by virtue of the way that they work, they keep track of all of the power that they consumed and how far the vehicle has gone. They have to, and they have to relay that back to the driver very accurately, much more so than gasoline cars have. They all have some pretty great errors in between the speed shown on the speedometer and how far the actual car has gone. But EVs can't get away with that. They actually have to be a lot more precise. Well, because of that, we're actually able to then plug numbers that are very, very accurate as far as the car is concerned. You know, how far did it go and how much energy did it use to get there. So that's something to remember going on here. At least that's an element that we don't have to wonder about. And I'll get back to that in a minute when we start talking about losses. Let's take a fun look at what April looks like when you don't send all of that power back to the power company. Looks like this. So here what we've got is everything above the line, instead of having it being sent back to the utility company, back to the power company, it goes into your car. Well, in April, we had 982 kilowatts of overage. And at the usage I mentioned before, that 32.4 kilowatts per mile, that's 3,030 miles in a month. 104 miles a day in April. So, if you look at this chart, there's got the car in there, so let me get rid of the car real quick. So if you look at this chart, what you'll see is that April gave us a couple of days where we were at or even below the consumption line of the house. If you only have one or two batteries, then you may wind up having to draw off of the grid on the last of those 2 days or during that second day. But with 6 power walls, that duck curve, that's not a day smoothing. With 6 power walls, it's smooth for a week. So now when we start looking at these trends in not just April, but other months where maybe we have fewer days that actually make it, now it should become clear to the folks watching this why we went for so many batteries. Because we want to really maximize the amount of time in the year that we're able to utilize that overage. If the overage exists within a week, then we get an opportunity to use it. If we go for a week where we don't quite make it, then we're going to have to tap into the grid a little bit to charge the batteries in the middle of the night, and then go for another 8-10 days, however many days we can go out with the addition of solar. So that was April. So now let's go ahead and pull the same thing up for May. Well, now we've got a surplus of 1,213 kilowatts. That's 3,744 miles. 125 miles a day on sunlight. June, basically the same thing. We wind up with this massive amount of overage. There isn't a single day when we're under the amount that the home uses, and now we're 1,179 kilowatts, 3,638 miles. Same thing, 125 miles a day. That billing period was a day shorter, and so that all kind of evened out. So that's what happens when you don't send the power back out the line right away. You go ahead and keep it locally, and then you're able to use it to charge your car. So realistically, are you going to be consuming 125 miles a day? I don't know. I'd be really interested in seeing your feedback on this video. Let me know how much driving you do a day. Do you charge at work for convenience? How much of that do you realistically do at home? I'd love to hear some feedback from all of you to see if we're on base here. But so realistically, even with charging the car, we're going to be sending some power out to the grid. And as long as they value that power, as long as they have net metering, some way of banking that power, it's a good thing. That then will offset your cost totally for the little bit that you do actually consume off of the grid in midwinter. And We don't know what that is yet, but we'll follow this along. The batteries should be installed in November. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later as we close out as well. So as I said before, now you get into a period where the production of the solar cells goes down a bit because of the heat, and the AC comes on, and so your consumption line goes up. So let's pull up July, boom. And so now what we see here is we've got 999 kilowatts of overage. Again, you can see where that line drove up. We had a cloudy day there, and so our total miles above the line for July is 3,083 miles. So we go down to August. Well, there we go. August was 767 kilowatt hours. Right? We had one day there where we dropped below the line. Not a problem. Batteries are really easy to cover for that day, so that you can keep your average up. September 710 kilowatts. October 754 kilowatts. Again, AC's coming down. We're not trying to cool the house as much anymore. Power consumption's coming down, and so then here we are with 2,327 miles in October. That's so. Then we get to do the fun little napkin calculations, where if you're in an area that's say roughly $3 a gallon for gasoline, and the Model S, if you were to get a similar size gasoline vehicle to a Model S, you'd be looking at somewhere around 24 miles a gallon, something like that. So if you plug those numbers into October, you got $290 of gasoline that didn't go out of your power socket to the utility company, only to then have them turn around and maybe charge you more for it on a cloudy day when you weren't producing, and you had to then pull in power for whatever reason. And so as we move forward, those are the kinds of things to really take a look at. And when you see videos like Vox's video where they say, oh well, yeah, you should definitely trust the utility companies to have your best interest at heart, and go ahead and pay that bond measure, and go ahead and deal with them charging you what they want to get it into your home. Man, just long term, that to me makes zero sense, and I actually somewhat resent the insinuation by Vox that it's either a difficult problem to solve the duck curve, or that we then have to go with our hat in our hand to the utility companies once again to have them solve the issues. No, we don't. Now let's talk a little bit about the reality. These numbers that I just posted on here are cute and all. But the reason that we're doing the Energy Sovereignty Project is to find out what the actual sunlight to wheels ratio is of that power. So the issue that we have, and why the amount of miles that we're actually going to be able to get on the car is going to be a little bit less, has to do with the losses from the inverters. Every time you transfer power from one state to another, from DC to AC, you suffer some losses. You have to run it through an inverter or a rectifier to swap it back one way and then the other. So when you have the solar on the roof, that's DC. And so that DC then has to be turned into AC by the home's inverter. But unfortunately, the power walls don't take DC, so you can't go straight to the power wall. You actually have to turn it into AC, or the house, which also runs the house. You're running your home appliances during the day anyway at the same time. So that power is being consumed by the home, so it's not a complete disaster. But your excess power, your overage, That's going into the batteries as AC. Only the Powerwall doesn't store it as AC. The Powerwall stores it in the DC battery banks. So that AC that you've just converted from DC has to be converted back into DC to be stored in the battery. Well, then you come home at night and you plug into your system with your electric vehicle, and now you want that stored energy back out of the Powerwall. Well, the Powerwall does not supply DC. It supplies DC from the battery, which it's stored into its inverter, and AC comes out. When AC comes out, it comes to your electric vehicle, where your electric vehicle reconverts it into DC to be stored in its batteries. So that power, before it gets into your car where it's actually usable, has to go through 4 inverters. So it's going to be interesting to find out what the actual miles are on the car. And again, that's why all you guys are tuned into this. You want to see this. You want to see this completed. So that's what Vox got wrong. I don't see a challenge for solar. Solar and batteries, we've known for a long time, they go hand in hand. They're going to be inseparable. So the duck curve issue is solved. It's a non-issue. So then we just need to answer the question: where do we solve it? Do we solve it? Do we say that this is a public utility issue and let them solve it? You know, and certainly there's situations where inner cities, apartments, and that kind of a thing, where it's just not physically possible to install batteries and solar for every home in the middle of a city. The answers for those situations are going to be different. But if you're in an industrial park or something of that nature where you're running a business there, or you're in your average suburban home, especially what we see around cities in California, it's a non-issue. I mean, you're going to have batteries at the home. So the biggest issues, the real biggest issues, what are they? What I've identified are threefold. Firstly, availability. The issue that we've been having for the better part of a year and a half, has been that we couldn't get our Powerwalls. There were simply no Powerwalls available. The manufacturing had not stepped up yet at the Gigafactory. They had batteries going to Australia. They had batteries going to Puerto Rico, and so they just weren't available, even with the Gigafactory. Well, Gigafactory is ramping up, so that issue is starting to be solved here, at least locally. But moving forward with mass adoption, that's going to be solar's real number one problem. The duck curve's real number one problem is going to be getting everybody their batteries. So unfortunately, on that end of it, there isn't really anything that we as consumers can do other than just ensuring that they know that there is a market for this. And so then they can work towards trying to fill those orders. That's going to do two things. Firstly, it's going to obviously make it so that nobody waits for their batteries. You make a phone call and the installer shows up with the batteries and does your install. But the other thing it does is that because of economies of scale, the prices of those batteries are also going to come down. So that's the first of the real challenges to solar. The other two are different but related. They are pinch points, or bottlenecks as they're referred to in the manufacturing industry. So whenever you have mass adoption, anytime you have a mass manufacturing, you always wind up with these parts in the process where the efficiency is neck down, and your total efficiency, in this case, the number of batteries that we can actually get installed in the homes in a given year, are all going to be drawn down by these pinch points. So the first of these pinch points is the inspection process. Now, the approval process. The The approval process is what we're going through painfully right now, which is where you have your system, you have it designed, you have all the components available ready to be installed, and then you have to submit a plan to the utility company so that they will then review your install and allow it to be installed. We're not even talking about anybody pulling wires yet. Nobody. This is just the schematic. This is just the plan on paper. And in our case, the issue has been that a normal home hookup is a 200 amp hookup. Well, that's based also on the power production of the home. Now, why they do that, I don't really know, but I suspect that it has to do something with where those two tie-ins meet to then power the home. Their assumption, I'm supposing, is that at some point that junction where the 200 amps that the power company supplies and the 200 amps that is supplied by the home is ultimately going to be drawn through a circuit, which then can't fail. So what they're demanding that we do is that they're demanding that we upgrade the home service to 400 amps. Well, we don't have any way to argue that point. We don't have any way to say, hey, our home is really only going to be drawing basically what you could pull off of a dryer plug for the entire home just to charge the batteries at night, that we don't actually need all of this power. That's something that they simply are not prepared to hear at this point. So moving forward, what is going to happen is that someone like me, and I may very well do it, is going to need to design a clamp, some device that will be easy for the homeowner to install, that will restrict the amount of power that is capable of being brought from the grid or sent to the grid from the homeowner. And what I've identified that as is right around 20 kilowatts. So if you installed a 240 volt line with 100 amps on an 80 amp breaker, so then you have nears makes no difference. You've got 20 kilowatts to use to transfer either from the grid to charge your batteries at night, or in the case of overage during the day, over and above what you're able to send to your batteries to get that up. Once that peaks out, then you're able to send up to 20 kilowatts to the power company. So what this device will do, aside from what I've just told you that it will physically do, will allow the consumer to say, hey, look, I've got a clamp. And so then they install that on the house. The public utility is only responsible for bringing power to the clamp, and then the clamp handles the house. In the case of a power failure on the grid, it will island the home, make sure that everything's all good there. In the case that you need to work on the solar system in the house, you'll be able to bypass it. So for that period of time, you'll be able to run at reduced current to the home so that you can run refrigerators and a few lights and that kind of thing, whatever you can run off of 20 kilowatts. And that's it. That's it. So then it makes the utility the emergency power, not the batteries in your house. The batteries in your house, that and the solar, that's your main source of power. And that's the way that it's going to get that approval process done when the utility company is faced with the reality that you could run every home in a subdivision off of a dryer plug each. So the second pinch point, the third of the problems, the second pinch point, is that final approval process that I mentioned. So you get that initial approval where the utility company says, okay, your plan is good, we'll let you go ahead and hook up. And then you have the building inspector end of it where they come and they do their business. Well, the building inspector's already been to your house. They were there when the house was constructed. What you've basically done is now you're going to make them come back for every single install. Now, in the case of some major modification to the house, obviously that's going to be appropriate. You're going to have a building inspector back out there anyway to go ahead and approve stuff, make sure everything's all to code, and then switch on. But moving forward, there's no way that California and the federal numbers that they have for adoption of solar and batteries, there is no way they're going to make those numbers if they don't have that approval done at the component level. In other words, you'll go to Lowe's and you'll buy your batteries, and on the end of those batteries will be a 200 amp shore tie, just like you use for a large boat, and that will plug directly into your home, right into the main panel, right into that, perhaps into that clamp that I was telling you about, and you're done. And you're done. You bought the batteries at Lowe's, they're already UL approved. Bring in, boom, throw the switch, there you go. The other thing that does is when it comes time to sell your home, then you either decide, are the batteries included or are they not? If they're not, you unscrew the shore tie, unplug it, throw it in the moving van, send it to the new home, plug it in, and you're done. There is no approval process. There is nobody else that comes in to make sure that that's all done. That was done when the home was installed. So once those three elements are taken care of, the companies supplying enough batteries, we're going to need Chevy and Ford and LG Chem and Mercedes, all of these major players, Volkswagen, anybody who thinks they're going to make a car should also then imagine that business as also supplying home batteries. And I just think that that's going to be the way that it happens, to be honest. And it has to happen that way for mass adoption. So this video has kind of gone on long enough, so we'll go ahead and start to wind it down here. The last thing I want to talk a little bit about is the Energy Sovereignty Project and where we're at. Again, I apologize for this taking so long to get out to you guys, but it was getting annoying to me, and I'm sure annoying to you guys, to keep having that date pushed back, and the information that I was given was conflicted, and so it just became a major issue. And so I thought, we're just going to have to wait and let this get sorted out. So thank you for sticking with us. We're almost ready to do the install. We've gotten final approval for the install itself, as far as for the plan. All right, and now the plan of attack is that our installer Sunworks is going to come in when the utility company upgrades the system, and they're going to do probably the lion's share of the installation that day, and then finish it up within 2 or 3 days, and then we'll be online. And once that happens, obviously we'll bring you guys the installation process, and then we can start talking about some real numbers. And it's going to be midwinter. It's not the ideal time when I would have liked to have energized the system. I would have liked to have energized the system just in one of those transitional periods, but we'll get an opportunity to see what the system will actually produce in midwinter, and then we'll follow it through our first transitional period where we awaken from winter. That'll be fun, and so then that's where we'll get some numbers that'll give us real value for an understanding standpoint of why we have all of those batteries. The batteries, they're most useful in those transitional periods, and we wanted to identify how much benefit you got from overage in your batteries. When you got around 90 kilowatts of storage, that should allow us to then start, like we saw with the vehicle, start pulling out the maximum number of miles driven on the vehicle as early as possible during the year, rather than having to pull power off of the grid. But thanks for tuning in. We'll keep these updates coming now more rapidly, obviously, once the project starts. And if this is the first video that you've seen on this, please go back, check out some of the earlier videos. The comments are very helpful. It actually drives future content, and we look forward to hearing from you and presenting you the project as it unfolds. Thanks for tuning in.